Yeah, recording started. You can start.
And streaming?
Yes.
Awesome.
Live.
It is live. OMG, it is live. So hello, welcome everybody. Today is going to be a kind of a different little panel discussion, kind of going into, especially for this month where we celebrate employees with disability in the ADA Act. I want to discuss the Americans with Disabilities Act, also known as the ADA of 1990. I almost said the 1900s. That sounded very like the witch, but of 1990, yes. Which was kind of an interesting thing, because I know if for anybody that's watching international, we all kind of have our own variation of like a Disabilities Act or something that allows people to have like an equal footing to help fight discrimination. And ours is kind of like similar to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which basically protected against, race, religion, gender, sex, etc. But this was a little bit different, where it also required companies and I almost said privateers, but companies to make like reasonable accommodations and help their employees, and also the public. So that's why if you look at buses, if you look at airplanes, if you look at buildings, they all have some variation to help those with possible disability be accommodated. So because this was passed and this is 30th year of this anniversary, I kind of want to reflect upon kind of three key things, which are, what does the ADA mean to our lovely panel, which we're going to get to in a second. What does it look like today? That's a big kind of an impact question for our personal, professional aspect. And the last one is like, what does the future of it hold? I think right now with COVID and the world going on, we have all got really used to our own little bubbles. However, ADA is also something that has helped us be able to feel more comfortable and safe outside of our home. So it's kind of an interesting little balance for us to relate back to what does the future hold. So speaking of experts, we love it. I would like to introduce today's panelist. We're going to start off with Dr. Tyrone Jackson. Also, when I give you your little name, just give a wave. And you can tell us a little bit about yourself. So let's start with Dr. Jackson. Who are you? What do you do? What's your experience? Are you happy today?
Well, I'll start off with, yes, I am happy today. So that's the very first thing. My name is Tyrone Jackson. I'm currently serving as the Interim Director of Human Resources for the District of Columbia Courts. I have over 30 years of human resource experience. Also retired from the military after 20 years of honorable military service. And my doctorate is in organizational leadership with a concentration in conflict resolution, and my master's in human resource management and development. So that's just a little sum about myself.
Very little sum about a very interesting background, I feel. Okay, the next we have is Ronald Thomas. There he is. Ooh, unmute.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ronald Lee Thomas. I'm currently serving as the Assistant Director of Finance and Admin for Smart Growth America, a nonprofit in Washington, D.C. We're focused on infrastructure and its equity and development of communities to make them safe, walkable, and accessible to everyone around the country. We're currently the leading model when it comes to that. We're consulted by various jurisdictions around the country in development using form-based codes and things of that nature to solve some of the problems in communities and development. I'm also currently serving a second term, looking to serve a third, and the statewide independent living council appointed by Mayor Bowser. I currently serve as executive board treasurer, and I'm very active in the amputee coalition because I like to see more people that look like us involved in ADA policy. And I've been a bionic double below the knee amputee for the past 12 years.
Whoa. Okay, I'm interested from everybody, but I think we're all like, okay, what is Ron got to come to the table? I'm going to stretch for that. Next one is we have Johnnie, whose name I forgot your last name, Bond, Johnny Bond. Microphone.
Thank you all for having me again. Always a pleasure to participate in Bay Atlantic University's panels. As Johnny Bond, I'm a lawyer based here in Washington, D.C. I have my own law firm, Johnny Bond Law. Within that law firm, we provide legal services to people who've been injured, no fault of their own, people who've been victimized, and people who generally just need legal representation to redress harms that have been done to them. I have confronted the ADA or worked with clients to gain rights under the ADA, not only in the private employment field, but also within public accommodations that are supposed to be made available consistent with the ADA Act and ADA building safety standards. So I'm very familiar with the ADA. I think this is a worthwhile discussion and panel as always. I appreciate being here with my fellow panelists. That's my story and I'm sticking to it.
I just went into that that's my story. That's my story. That's just my country self. All right. Last but not least is Jenna Bryant.
You got that right. Look at you.
I did. It took me 10 minutes.
Hello, my name is Johnna Bryant. I am currently the manager for Montgomery County's Occupational Medical Services Clinic. That is an on-site clinic for Montgomery County employees, including all of our first responders and essential personnel. So I work a lot with firefighters, police officers, sheriffs, you name it. And COVID has been very busy for us, to say the least, as I am sure that it has been for everyone on this panel. So thank you. Prior to that, I was the HR director for a Fortune 500 company for 12 years. And this ADA thing I've been doing for quite some time. I have two relatives that would fall under the ADA spectrum. So that's kind of what drove my desire to get more involved. My mom was also a registered nurse back in the day when the ADA was nowhere near what we know it to be today. So thank you for having me.
Not a problem. I'm excited. Okay, now just like when we run, I'm excited. I am pumped. Let's jump into this. Okay, so kind of hearing what I just heard about for our introductions, you know, the ADA and aspects of it has impacted us differently. Personally, I'm epileptic. I got diagnosed when I was starting my freshman year of high school. Not a fun thing to happen to you. And I have gone through, you know, having the accommodations to help. And I honestly would not have been able to probably graduate high school, let alone get a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. The amount of times I had seizures outside of a classroom is uncountable. That's a story for another day. But I think it's very important that, you know, that's my personal story, but also seeing how students, and I have people come and talk to me about their, you know, wanting accommodations and also just exploring it. So I want to start with Dr. Jackson is, you know, what does the impact of the ADA mean to you specifically? And just not personally, it can be in a professional aspect, and that's for everybody, but what does it kind of mean to you?
Professionally, the ADA has transformed the workplace and how we look at our employees, the applicants that come in and apply for the jobs and are seeking opportunities with us. There has been, since the creation of the ADA, where every organization, especially inside government, state and local governments, have to create policies and procedures set around. Now we almost all have an ADA coordinator or an ADA point person to be able to address those initiatives and to ensure that people's rights under the ADA are adhered to. Also to work with them in developing reasonable accommodations and identifying when we can't do that. And it really has shifted the mindset of HR especially when ADA falls up underneath the umbrella of HR, in dealing with and ensuring that all employees that are faced with a disability have rights to participate in the workforce just like any other employee. So it has changed the dynamics by which the way we do business in the last 30 years significantly.
Anybody? Okay. Anybody else want to jump in?
I would
Is this to
agree
all the
with
panelists?
I would agree with Dr. Jackson in that it has changed dramatically since I believe a lot of us came into our careers. And one of the things that we really try to focus on is ensuring that whether it's a current employee or an applicant that is in need of assistance for some type of accommodation, we want to make sure that we go as far as we can in ensuring that they're successful. One of the things I know that I spend a lot of time, because I do a lot of training on ADA, is making sure that managers and supervisors understand it's not always necessarily what you can see, but it oftentimes can be those disabilities that you do not see. And just kind of breaking down some of those stereotypes that come along with what the ADA is and what it means in the workplace and in society as a whole.
I see that a lot myself in trying to get people to understand the varying spectrums of what disability is, especially with some of my work, Dr. Jackson, with DC government, specifically with the DC Board of Elections, which is kind of timely given the elections coming up in a couple of weeks. One of the things I also do is I work with your attorneys with DC Board of Elections to ensure ADA compliance at various voting registration centers and districts around DC. And that's one of the biggest challenges I think we face, getting people to understand what that is and the importance of setting up ADA stations for people to be able to vote, so everyone can have a voice in this election and not just access internally once people reach polling places, but the literal access to voting places, working elevators, proper ramps, not just having ramps, but ensuring that they're at the proper angles, all of those things, proper signage, whether it be Braille, having magnifying glasses available at tables, earphones in voting stations, all of those things. And I think a lot of times people don't understand the importance of them, because you always have this notion that, oh, well, we don't have many people that need them. But even if you have 1 out of 1,000 people voting at any station, you made it available for that one person. So sometimes the challenge is trying to get people to understand the importance of having these things available. Because you don't need them doesn't mean that other people may not. So.
Yeah, and if I can chime in on all of this, I believe the one thing that I would say, what it means to me professionally in terms of a body of law, is that it needs to be, and it is, a breathing, living body of law. And the circumstances which I have dealt with it have been in the educational environment, where students have individualized education programs. And one of the major issues that I've noticed with that is that these are very medical and healthcare specific plans that are specific to this individual child, yet most of the educational facilities don't have people who are trained to, number one, understand them, and then number two, implement the care that's needed to make sure that the students in the IEP is satisfied for their particular disability. I've also dealt with it with a client who was injured in a hotel where the ADA specifications for safety were not met, and she resulted in injuring and fracturing her neck. And there as well, the hotel had made its efforts to comply with some of the standards, but those standards had lapsed and they didn't necessarily meet them as they were required to. And then you run into the legal arguments that they put forth to defend themselves in those cases. And then there's also been in the context of employees who request public accommodations. And in that context, it really does come down to whether people understand the issue as a disability. So as the body of law, what it means to me is that, you know, it reminds me of a time when America didn't have such of the divisive politics involved, and we were all of one mind in Congress looking to help the American people and sections of the American people, and we need to continue moving in that direction, especially with the ADA. But it also speaks to what's required for a body of law to actually be put into effect. And as you stated, you know, people have to be educated. There needs to be a specific, empathetic insight into the law and what it means to make it practical to help people with disabilities. And I think as the term and the concept of a disability evolves as it should, what a disability, you know, some disabilities we're not even aware of or we're not aware of, will come to light as we continue to move forward. And, you know, we have to focus on how we apply the ADA or expand it or amend it to bring that in. And then again, going into the practical impact of satisfying the requirements of the ADA. I think that is the biggest challenge that we have.
Okay. Whoa. Good start. Which kind of, I want to kind of expand upon a little bit what everybody was talking about. And I'm going to kind of direct this to Johnna to start, is regarding, you know, we were talking about understanding, y'all were touching base on understanding and creating the ability and the kind of the environment for that, and also the lack thereof of it. I kind of want to talk about, you know, what else does the struggles in creating tolerance and acceptance for those individuals with a disability in the process of registration, what does it look like? And what are sometimes, you know, other struggles that we or other people, you know, that look at this could help to assist in?
Well, I think, yeah, kind of.
So basically, what could, you know, what is, okay, you got it.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we can really do when we talk about diversity and inclusion, you know, is include people with disabilities. Oftentimes when we talk about diversity and inclusion, we talk about race, we talk about gender, you know, those things, but we also need to include people with disabilities so that we can further educate people. As Mr. Thomas indicated, we have to continue to educate people on exactly what that means. It's not necessarily always what is on the outside, but thinking, you know, big picture, you know, not just what we see, you know, someone that may have a vision impairment, you know, that walks around with a cane, or they may have a seeing eye animal or service animal, but sometimes it may be those things that you may not necessarily be able to visually see. I do a tremendous amount of work with people with disabilities that are mental health related. And those are things, you know, they may be sitting for a test. And I'm sure those of you that are dealing in education see this a lot, that they may be sitting for a police exam, you know, for captain or lieutenant, and they may need additional time, or they may need a quiet room, or they may need to have their test read verbally instead of written. They may need an interpreter, and the list goes on and on and on. And I think the more that we educate people and include it when we discuss diversity and inclusion, the more educated we can get people away from the norms, you know, that we normally attach to people with disabilities.
I want to jump in on that. First of all, Johnny, you said everything I was going to say, so all I can say is amen. But I did want to point out that something that Ronald had said earlier about the Board of Elections. I had recently had an opportunity to attend one of their training sessions, and I was very pleased to find that they opened the training session with 2 videos on how to interact and deal with people with disabilities. And they were really great videos. I actually made a mental note to say that I wanted to be able to get those videos for the courts because they were super. And it just shows that, excuse me?
They're on YouTube.
All right. So it just shows how progress is being made in sensitivity. So here we were gathered together for election training, but they understood the importance of making sure that one of the areas we deal with is our awareness, our understanding, and our ability to be inclusive toward people that have a disabilities. And I just thought that was a marvelous step in the right direction, just to be mindful about it.
Yeah, because after those videos, there's always a follow-up discussion immediately afterward about language to use and not use.
Yes. Great.
Anybody else? I get that teacher voice. I'm like, okay, who wants to go? I don't want to leave anybody out.
I think they covered it well. There's nothing more that I can add to that.
That is fantastic. That is perfect. I actually have a follow-up question for a little bit, everybody. I like how we were discussing the concept of language and being mindful on this. What is advice that you would give towards continuing that conversation, but also just approaching it? I think, there's very, especially in DC with having such a with Gallaudet and universities where there is a different types of language for individuals that, how can I say this? There's some words that some people prefer, there's some that are not. Like,
and he froze.
I think he froze.
Somebody help me. It's a Tuesday.
Well, let's just thank God that we're not using the term deaf and dumb anymore.
Yes.
Or retarded.
Or retarded, yes.
I mean, we have made a great strides towards that, yes. But I mean, a good thing is, deaf and hard of hearing. And there are some people that prefer one or the other. I think somebody commented, I believe it was you, Jenna, about, I'm looking at my notes, but you talked about, oh my gosh, I went brain dead. Basically with diversity and inclusion, and I have a very big, when I was creating the department here and refining it, I made sure that we had a glossary of it, of words that are appropriate, words that aren't appropriate, and kind of like the meaning of it. Right. So I think that, that was like one step for me to come out and say, this is what we need to do. But then once again, it does come down to preference. So I guess how do we keep that mindfulness going forward?
I think the biggest thing is when you encounter someone and you're aware of their disability, you ask them how they want to be addressed. That's usually the surefire way to ensure that you're not being disrespectful to anyone, and how you relate to them and their particular disability. When in doubt, don't. Always ask.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think the one thing that I found really helpful in my approach to understanding my clients' issues and then also helping the other side to understand them is to put myself in the position of the person and truly try to feel around and see how I would feel or what I would need and try to communicate that from that perspective. And I think that is one of the things that's very necessary in the approach to the ADA, not only from private employers, but state and local governments, public accommodation facilities, even online and internet protocols, because there is the title 4 of the ADA that requires that telecommunication services take the ADA into effect. So there's the language piece, and you know what I believe it corresponds with Ronald said and everybody else is that, you know, it's important once you put yourself in that person's position or in the position of someone else and try to empathize and feel, then proceed with asking questions to get clarification about how they feel and what's needed. You know, the ADA obviously has some things that it covers and doesn't cover, and then complying with the relevant law. That's another entirely different process. But I think it starts with really trying to understand from another's perspective what is needed and what can be helpful to address any issues navigating or using or facilitating any facilities.
I just want to make a comment about that. Thanks, Johnny, because I just wanted to bring up, we were involved in a training class about a couple of years ago, and we're trying to teach people about sensitivity and being empathetic and all those things that if you don't know, ask. But someone, one of the people in the class brought up an interesting point and said, I was trying to put myself in their position. And I thought if I was in their position, I would appreciate the help. He gave a situation in which he went to help someone that was walking, that was blind, and he thought he was going to just help them across the street, and they took great offense to that and said, I don't need your help, da, 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 da. And it left him stunned because he thought in his mind, if that was me, I would have liked the help. So there's a balance there that we have to reach out to. It's not just how would you like to be treated? You've got to step back and realize that that person is an individual and you've got to respect their space. And by all means, do not ever put your hands on them.
Right.
To help them, even to help them.
Yeah.
But it's a very interesting dynamic when we think, and when people want to help, but they are stuck right now in this day and time of, I don't even know how to proceed with wanting to help. So to that point, it is those of us that are engaged in employment and education, it is about training, 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 and training again. You cannot offer a training class one time and then think you're done. This has got to be something that is kept alive. It's got to be like our Constitution. It's got to be forever growing and a living animal. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. One of the things I try to always implement in my trainings is situational awareness, right? A lot of times people are just not aware of what is happening. And so the example that you just gave about the gentleman that thought he was providing assistance, you know, one of the things I always tell people is, you know, sometimes people don't want your help. And as stunning as that may be, that is the environment and the society that we live in. So just be cognizant of that. You know, my father used to tell my sister and I as girls, you know, be aware of your surroundings all the time because you never know what's going on, right? And that has, you know, turn out to be very valuable even into adulthood. Just being aware, and that's something that I think a lot of people have a tendency to forget when you're dealing with someone that may appear, again, that they need assistance. But, you know, touching someone and making an assumption that assistance is needed can sometimes be a little sticky. You know, it can, muddy waters can happen very quickly.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. I certainly appreciate that, and that's where I said, ask and communicate after you put yourself in that position, and that was assuming a lot. Also, and I can tell you, in stating that I was often working with someone who had been the victim of a ADA violation. So we're kind of going back in time, and I'm trying to explain to human resources who is trying to manage, on one hand, this person's health rights for, confidentiality. On the other hand, trying to implement an accommodation as best they can. And on the other hand, dealing with other peers and colleagues who have no idea how to evaluate, be aware of, or interact with someone who has, let's say in this particular instance, a mental health disability, which manifests as behaviors and conduct that they don't feel fits within the working environment. So that's where I was coming from in terms of enacting the policy. But I completely 100% agree. You should not assume that because you put yourself, or you think you put yourself in somebody's position, that you can now help them or even assume that they need help. I think the main thing is to try to understand, have some empathy, and then especially within, when we're talking within the strictures of the ADA, for instance, human resources, how do you balance those objectives? How do you balance those issues? And then in an accommodation standpoint, how do you, not only just meet the minimum requirements, but, if you have to navigate your restroom, how would that happen for you? So I think that's where I think, if I can, really hit something hard, I think people really trying to be empathetic, aware, and put themselves in the bodies of the individual within what they need to do to comply with the ADA is probably more of what I was trying to communicate. I don't think anyone should assume that someone wants or needs their help, and then even try to go about that without communicating with that person and gaining their consent for giving that help. So I'm glad we pointed that out, because that is a very important nuance of that point.
And I definitely think the one summary, everything is communication. And also a little bit is admitting when you are wrong, or, don't ever assume, of course, but also if you do make a mistake, say, I'm sorry, also as I teach students and everything, and I even myself as somebody with a disability, when interacting with other people, I do need to realize, okay, this is a learning experience. What do I need to know about this? Like for when I ever start a new job with my epilepsy, my rule is when I tell people, they're like, oh, what do we do if you have a seizure? With me giving my information, I'm always like, oh, unless I fall down and I'm bleeding, put me in an Uber and send me home. I don't need the medic bill. Like, I'm just going to sleep for 13 hours.
Right.
But, that is a way I think that we should always feel free to reach out, but also realizing, too, is sometimes there is like that an embarrassment. It took me a very long time to get to the point where I could say more freely about it. Sure. So definitely, I love how you all brought the nuance, the mindfulness, and everything.
Can I add one more thing to that, Tyler?
You always can, Johnny. You always can.
One thing that I'm grateful for is that there's so much information online to understand different health issues. And I think in putting yourself into someone's position, you need to educate yourself with as many reliable sources as possible about what the disability is and what it's comprised of. And I think that goes a long way, and that's probably a huge distinction, or at least a more evolved one than when the act was first put in place. We didn't have such access to information that we do now. We have WebMD and every other healthcare facility, Mayo Clinic included, so many that has free information to explain the symptoms, the diagnosis, the treatment, of so many different conditions that the first step I would say about putting yourself into anyone's position is to educate yourself about the condition and try to understand it as much as possible. And I think that goes a long way. And I think that a major issue is, you know, a lot of people need to enact the laws and the policies of the ADA have to first be educated, and they need to educate themselves. So, yeah.
I like to point out that I have a lot of questions, and you guys y'all keep answering them all. So we're gonna jump into the future aspect. So this is gonna be addressed to you, Ron. I want to talk about, like, you know, the future. You know, what does, like, you know, the future of the ADA look like, especially with, I think, the increase of the digital era, which, you know, Johnny brought about WebMD. You spoke about those videos that I think Dr. Jackson saw at a training event. Like, what does the future of it look like?
Well, I think to address my original question, and I'll tie that into what I think the future looks like, or, you know, hope it does. I'd hope the goal of the ADA is that the relationship is no longer seen as an adversarial one, and the act itself is no longer regulatory, but becomes part of the overall culture. So it's something that's incorporated in HR and something that businesses look to focus on when creating an establishment, making themselves ADA compliant and accessible to everyone. Also, too, that wages for persons with physical disabilities are at least leveled off so they're even with persons that don't have disabilities. Because right now, I'm not sure if people are aware that 40% of people with disabilities make less than people without disabilities doing the same exact job. And a lot of times employers feel like, well, they're spending money to make the reasonable accommodations. So oftentimes persons with physical disabilities suffer as a result. And a lot of times people with disabilities don't complain. It's almost, you know, they take what they can get because they're thankful for being employed versus not being employed. So you have those dynamics as well. Also, too, I would like to see the future of the ADA get to a point where it addresses the definitions of what disabilities are, because they're ever growing, they're always expanding. Because right now that seems to like be an issue with the judicial interpretation of what disability is. So expanding upon that as well in the future. And that the ADA also becomes more to, how can I put this? It becomes more than just a springboard for businesses of all sorts, so that they're not just doing the bare minimum, that they're looking beyond what is expected as far as government regulate, just, you know, federal regulations are concerned, and they look to address more than just that. An example I'll give is something that Johnnie addressed when he was talking about hotels. Oftentimes, and in my travels, hotels will make reasonable accommodations for room widths and ensuring that people have rolling showers, and those accommodations for desk and padding under sinks so persons in wheelchairs and power chairs don't hit their knees when approaching the sinks and things of that nature. But those are just the minimums. If someone is in need of an ADA room, what's often missing in them is they'll give you a shower chair and all those other things, but most of them don't have handheld showers. Now, the next time you go to a hotel, take a look at an ADA room. That's usually the number one thing that's missing that people need the most, because those establishments are doing the bare minimum so they can be ADA certified on the current federal standards. So I hope the future of the ADA changes to address all of those things as well. I might be rambling a little bit because I can think of so many things. But those are things that kind of stick out immediately when I think of the future of the ADA and what it looks like long term.
I'm here for it. Anybody else?
I just want to say bravo, Ronald, because I can't follow that act, bro. It's really good. You covered all them bases and points.
That was really good.
I feel like there's an applause. Like, you just need to stand up. Like,
There you go. There.
You did it. Yes. Yes. Well, I want to hit on one quick question.
Tyler, let me jump in on that. I can't follow.
We got a little bit. We got some good questions, so a little bit of time.
Okay. Okay. You know, I think, you know, the only thing that I'd like to say is that similar with the ADA, you know, there is an aspect of the civil rights laws that I think is consistent with the ADA, and there's but some distinction. Civil rights laws, when questioned or implemented with Supreme Court justice level, we've heard over time that there should be a point at which we don't need the civil rights laws, or there's a point, and that has been kind of an evolution of, you know, all right, do we really need these laws? Do we need to enforce them? And we hope that we will eventually achieve that. But what I'd like to say about the ADA is I think that the overall goal should, in the ideal, and I like to think about the ideals for any body of law, is that you don't need them. You know, I didn't want to throw that out there without talking about what that implies for the civil rights law, and we could talk about that for hours. But in this situation, I don't think there's ever a point where we would not need the ADA in place, because people will always have disabilities, and disabilities will evolve, and the definitions of them will evolve, and we'll understand some more as time goes on. But I believe an ideal vision for the ADA is full integration. And by full integration, you would say, you know, enforcement of certain issues aren't needed as much or as vigorously, because we've taken a lot of things into account and fully integrated them. So I believe that that's one thing that we can try to look and strive for, is full integration. And you know, I'll let Ron or Mr. Jackson or Johnna talk about what that really looks like from a perspective. But I believe, you know, I'm just throwing that out there, that I think if we were trying to move beyond the ADA, it would be level of full integration. And that's probably what I would just say.
For it to become a part of the norm instead of the exception, you know, I believe we talked about it before. If we're going to talk about inclusion and diversity, it has to be a part of the norm. Unfortunately, sometimes you're talking about human nature, right? You know, being what it is. People will always have prejudices for one thing or another, whether it's skin color, gender, disabilities. And sure, again, as the list goes on, that's the challenge that we run into. But the future of the ADA, the ideal situation would be for it to be a part of the norm and not the exception.
Right, so it becomes part of the everyday culture.
Correct.
Right.
So we actually got some questions that actually, this one question really does build into this one. I'm going to click it. I don't know how to answer live. Okay. Oh, no. Sorry, I hit the wrong button. Okay, so one of our attendees says, as Ms. Bryant stated, I have an invisible condition. I recently completed a bachelor's in HR. I find that while attending university, staff and faculty were very helpful. However, I have not completed the application process for employment because I grew frustrated and discouraged by the company's testing processes. Even when I knew I had the qualifications and the work experience, I could not complete the assessment tests. So how does a person like me get on a potential employer's radar for employment considerations if they are looking at these scores and hiring based upon scoring?
So that is a great question, because we, you know, just implemented mandatory, since we have so many employees that are working from home, teleworking. we just implemented IT for new security protocols because everybody wants to make sure that employment information is being protected, right? And they rolled this out as mandatory security awareness training. I can't tell you how many people on my radar contacted me and said, I can't take it. It's not ADA compliant and it's not user friendly, you know, for someone that may need to use JAWS, you know, software, or someone who may have some type of disability where the normal test taking or normal training doesn't apply. So I immediately contacted the county's IT team, and I'm not going to repeat how I addressed that issue with them, but I was basically kind of like, what the heck? You know, did no one think, you know, that we needed to also include those employees who may need some technology assistance when we rolled out this, mind you, mandatory security training? If it's mandatory, you have to make it accessible to everyone. So to answer that question, especially in HR, the company should have someone that is responsible for addressing those type of issues when they have applicants that are applying for jobs that are looking for assistance for test taking, to be able to provide you with the assistance that you need to be able to successfully complete the test or the application that you're trying to complete.
Sorry. I'm taking notes. If everybody keeps wondering what I'm doing, I'm like, so much of this stuff is, so much of our information is great, and I'm just like, doing it. Okay, our next one is from another individual that says, hello, I am recently been appointed the ADA coordinator for my agency. I am also the trainer for my agency. I do not have years of experience in this topic, but I would like to be knowledgeable. My question is, is there anything that you are aware of regarding ADA coordinator training certificate programs, such as the one offered through the University of Missouri College of Human and Environmental Science, School of Architecture Studies? Is there something that I should be considering completing? So I'm guessing they kind of want some help. Like, what should we get where can we go to get training? Where can we get this information?
I'll let you go, Shannon. John, you can answer that one.
Did that just get punted to me?
Yes, it did.
You are the guru. You are the guru of this section. We're just like, okay, we got it.
No way. So I can tell you that being in this area, the Mid-Atlantic ADA group is a wonderful place to start to just get a wealth of knowledge regarding ADA and ADA training. I know one of the other places that I use very often is the JAN Job Association Network, Job Accommodation Network, Job Accommodation Network, that has a wealth of information there as well. There's a lot of different agencies and programs that you can take out there that will provide you with information on how the do's and the don'ts, the beginnings and the end, the basic information related to ADA coordination training. But I would definitely start there. I'm not sure what area, what region they live in, but each part of the country has the ADA, I believe it's ADA.org or ADA, and they have, if you live in the western part of the country or the southeast region, there's a wealth of information out there, and it's on Facebook, YouTube. They have lots of videos and information on there if you're just starting out in it.
Also, too, I'm not sure where the person is, but a lot of states have independent living councils. And a lot of them, some states are large enough where they may have 2 or 3 districts. Some just have 1, depending on state size, but they can always contact the National Council of Independent Living and find out if there's one available in their state. And their states oftentimes will be able to offer classes and resources, and a lot of them, believe it or not, are free. So it's just a matter of just reaching out to them, because we get federal funding for a lot of that stuff that people don't take advantage of. The money just sits there and rolls over year after year. So.
And I just want to add one thing, that if you're a member of the Society of Human Resource Management, they have a huge network that can tap into various different organizations that will be able to provide you with specific HR-related training for ADA. See, I thank you, Johnna, for just stimulating that in my mind.
They do. SHRM has a wealth of information that you can reach out to. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Okay, and then our last one is, what, in your opinion, has been any negative problems from the ADA? So basically repercussions, like, is there anything that's negatively happened because the ADA has come into existence, in your opinion?
I know I may get some pushback on this, so now I'm going to take it tiptoe sort of gently into this. But I think there is, especially after the ADA Amendment Act, employers still have to deal with the abuse of the ADA. And ADA connected with FMLA, and you put those two animals together, and managing them becomes oftentimes a very difficult situation for the workplace, especially if you start having several people inside a particular division on intermittent FMLA, plus needing accommodations, and where this goes. Because as Johnna pointed out, and I think Johnnie also pointed this out, the accommodations aren't always what we normally think they are, and the disabilities aren't always for someone that is hard of hearing, blind, or has some type of mobility issues. You got a plethora of other issues out there that is, and I don't want to say assaulting the workforce, but that employers are having to deal with in a very real way to be compliant, to be sincerely trying to provide the rights of individuals with the disability. But it's becoming a ever increasingly difficult thing to manage and navigate through from an employment perspective. I know, Johnnie, as a lawyer, I know we got to do it, but it's becoming increasingly difficult, especially when we live in a more litigious society where people know their rights, and so we're having to cross all the I's and cross all the T's and dot all the I's to make sure that we afford them of their rights, and at the same time continue operationally going forward. So
yeah, that is,
I think I dealt
that is a challenge. Yeah. That is, I would agree, that is definitely a challenge for employers. That's why it's even more important to have someone that is dedicated to doing that, what they call the triangle, the ADA, the FMLA, and workers' compensation, right?
Oh, yes.
Because oftentimes they run, together. Yeah. And when I have to talk to my managers and supervisors about that triangle, they're just like, Johnna, you're killing me. But it's a tricky web. It can be done. operationally, it's painful initially, but if you have someone that is knowledgeable about how to manage the three when they come together, they don't always, but sometimes they do. It can work because, as you said, it is a piece of the law that we do have to be in compliance with, as is the FMLA, as with state mandated workers' compensation.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, I have to step in on this because, and I like the question because it really made us dig deep to say, okay, well, this is all cheery and good. It's wonderful. Well, what are some issues that arise from it? I'll still push back on any characterization of a result or product of the ADA being described as negative, because once you embark on the challenge of trying to redress and accommodate and deal with an issue for disabilities or any type of injustice, the challenges become part of the process. So I love the question, but I'm going to defend the law and defend what the policy of the law is, to say, let's not look at anything as negative. Let's look at it as a part of the challenge. And I can give you some examples of some language that are out there about some of the most critical amendments to our Constitution. And that is the amendment for free speech. You say that, I know you've heard it before, and if you haven't, let me say it, but you have to permit some bad speech to defend the good speech. So that's the way I would look at it. Once we have a body of law in place like this, all the challenges that result, all of the people who may pursue frivolous lawsuits or frivolous claims or try to abuse and misuse the rights afforded under the ADA, that's a challenge. And what it takes is for us to step up and create more mechanisms and thought processes to filter through and decipher and distinguish between frivolous and abusive claims. But the challenge should then be to fulfill the ideals of the law so that the people who are protected under it get the full benefit of it. So that's what I'd like to say. I do like the question, though. I don't want the person who asked that question to think that, I'm criticizing it. I think we have to challenge ourselves to see what are some of the challenges and negative aspects that can come out of anything that we try to implement. But, in responding to that question, I'd like to, kind of focus on what the challenge is in pursuing the law.
Well said, Johnny.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our hour. I know, time flies.
Wow. Yeah, it did fly.
So quick thing, is there any programs or anything, any events or anything going on that you would like to speak about that you'd like our viewers and participants to look into? Shout out for anything? No.
Real quick, I would just say go online and educate yourself as much as you can about the law of the ADA. There's some really good websites out there that summarize the laws and what it applies to. Once you become familiar with that, I believe people with disabilities are more familiar. If you don't have a disability, you don't come into contact with anyone that does, and this is all a foreign concept to you, please educate yourself about it. And then as you look around, you become educated about the law. I'm pretty sure you'll look around and see people with disabilities. And if you come up against that, do as I think everybody on the panel has said, educate yourself about it, become aware, and try and communicate and try to understand as best as you can what the person needs or don't need from you or the environment in order to navigate their day-to-day lives.
And YouTube is also, like I said, a great place to look for instructional videos, do's and don'ts regarding disability engagement and things of that nature. It's a great resource. So if you have any questions, just looking for different information, videos for Dr. Jackson, YouTube is a really great resource for that. There's a lot on YouTube for that.
Outstanding.
Great. Very good. Very good. And
So
again,
I'd like to close by just saying, thank you all for having me.
And promoting his material. Jenna, what were you saying?
I just, to go back to the question that the individual had that was applying for, I believe they said they were looking for information as far as being able to apply for a job. Again, go back to that employer. I don't know if they're a large or a small employer, but someone in that company is responsible for the recruitment and selection process with that company. The EEOC website, the federal EEOC website, also has a ton of information in regards to what employers are required to do when it comes to providing accommodations for applicants and for employees. So use that again as a valuable resource.
Perfect. All right. Well, I would like to thank all of you for coming. I would like to also point out, as I said, you messed up all my questions because you all were answering them way too well in advance, but I love it. I would love to do a follow-up panel, kind of explain more of this. I think there's a lot more ideas and things out there, especially with our amazing, you all are, my notes alone for stuff I want to follow up and research is fantastic. So thank you each. I
said, feel free to email me.
You all will be getting emails from me. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you. You guys are done. You're free.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Everyone, have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Enjoy the day.
Thank you so much. Bye. Bye.